Welcome to the complete animation of Delilah from 101 Dalmatian Street. And when I say the complete animation, I mean it. I don't think I really fully comprehended exactly how much of an undertaking this particular project would be. I was like, oh yeah, Delilah, she's a neat character, but she's more of a side character because this show is mostly about Dylan and Dolly. But it turns out that Delilah actually has quite a bit of screen time. About 25 minutes of screen time. But, who am I to complain? This project gave me a chance to once again comb through the footage of 101 Dalmatian Street and really just marvel at the visual genius of this show. It's like I am a huge critic of the CalArts art style. It's been used in so many things that have no business having an art style like that. Like Thundercats Roar, absolutely ugly. Never gonna watch it. The series that followed up My Little Pony: A New Generation, absolutely disgusting faces. It's the oval mouths. It's so much of that. And you would think that with me having such distaste for that art style that I would dislike 101 Dalmatian Street, but I don't. 101 Dalmatian Street is they basically solved the CalArts art style. They figured out how to make it work. Just the way that the proportions work, the way that it's like the only time that the CalArts art style really shows up is when the character is facing the camera. Otherwise, it's not that. It's yeah. And 101 Dalmatian Street, it's so unique. It's like you look at it and you're like, oh, this is a modern art style. But when you really start to look at it, you're like, oh, this is the modern art style, but it's doing things that I've never seen before. And it looks good. It's appealing. It's like, that's the thing that I have to be sold on before I will invest in a show. I have to think that it looks good. Like, I have to be able to look at a screenshot and be like, oh, that looks good. And then I'd be like, oh, I'm invested. It's like, there are some people who, it's like the only thing that they care about for a TV show is the story. It'll be like, there are some people who can watch 5 billion different animes because they get invested in the stories. And that's fine. I, however, really struggle with anime because just at a fundamental visual level, I find anime to be largely unappealing. And the fact that they all kind of look the same doesn't help matters. But there is nothing that looks like 101 Dalmatian Street at all. They're like, this is unique. And it's there's so many elements of just the visuals of this show. A big part of like the big thing is the characters. The characters, it's all digitally done. Like every show these days is done digitally. It's a very rare thing. Basically, Cuphead, not the series, but the game is basically the only major project in recent memory that was made on physical paper. And even then, they still, like, even then they talked about how for final cleanup, the final cleanup and coloring and everything, they still do it digitally. It's basically nobody is doing things all in the real traditional style. And 101 Dalmatian Street, it sort of leans into it. It's like it knows that it's it's all done digitally. It knows that the viewers know that it's all done digitally. And it still is able to pull off things like having outlines that are kind of rough. Little rough outlines where it has just a little bit of sort of like a drawerly aspect to it. And everybody who watches it knows that it's just a brush or some other digital effect that gets that. But that it's so self-aware and it's confident. It is so confident in it. And the other thing that I really like is the backgrounds. 101 Dalmatian Street has sort of an impressionistic background style for the there's the close backgrounds, like what you're seeing right here, where it's, fairly detailed and, has actual perspective and things. But there's one episode. It's not this episode isn't included in this complete animation, but it's the one where Dylan goes on a camping trip with Dawkins and Hansel and Fergus in the middle of a park in London. And it's such a sort of an absurd concept, but they pull it off so well. Like, story-wise, this show has a lot of sitcom-y elements, but the visuals, oh my goodness, the visuals. In that campout episode, you look at the cityscape behind, and they are just the most simple shapes with these, fuzzy outlines. Like, if you look around here, places where there are shadows and things, that's like the perfect example of what the outline of those buildings look like. It's sort of like, it's almost like that spray paint brush that old versions of MS Paint used to have. Like, the backgrounds in this are so fascinating, how they work and how well they mesh with almost a slightly different art style of the main characters. And I've said it before in other videos. I think I've done one episode of Dolly and an episode of what's her name? Summer and Dante. Like, I've done my fair share of scrubbing through the footage of this, but this show still visually strikes me. And it's hard to really nail down exactly what it is, but this show gets it. It's a unique, appealing, modern digital art style, but it works. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think that the biggest regret about this entire thing is that we're probably only going to get this one season. Every time I talk about how we're probably only going to get it one season, the comments are flooded with people saying, according to this one, site that's basically just a rumor, there actually will be another season. It's just going to take a while. And all I can say is, I'll believe it when I see it. I doubt it'll actually happen. And so this one season of 101 Dalmatian Street will just stand as a shining beacon of a show that was destined for greatness, but just never got its audience, never got the attention. But, and like, basically everything that this show, everything that you would want out of a show like this, it eventually does. It's like, you want to follow up on the whole Cruella de Vil thing? Oh, like, that's for the most part, this show is one-off episodes that aren't, progressing a big narrative, but the ones that do are actually some of the really good episodes. And when Cruella de Vil actually does make her entrance, she is just terrifying. She really looks like she's some 90-year-old woman who is like basically running off of pure spite and hatred. It's weird. But for the rest of the show, it's sort of like one-off episodes that are kind of reminiscent of a sitcom, but at the same time, it does what the Looney Tunes show did, where it's like, oh, we're going to have an animated show that really sort of riffs off of, the sitcom genre, but we're going to make it work. And the problem with that is each individual episode on its own isn't particularly endearing. It's like, this is the show where you cannot be like, oh, I want to show this show to my friends and they'll become invested and they'll like it. It just doesn't work. This show, you have to come in on your own terms and want to like it, and then you will find that you will like it. This is not a show where you start from the first episode and be like, oh man, this narrative is gripping, I want to keep going, because the first episodes are basically like pilot episodes and they're really bad. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The stories in the first episodes are no good. But they do serve their purpose. They introduce this world that they're building, but at the same time, they don't even really abide by that. Like, there are rules and concepts that are established in the first few episodes that are kind of contradicted later on. It's sort of like the writers, they wrote those episodes and they sort of figured out that they wanted to do things differently going on later. And so, like, the 101 Dalmatian Street is such an interesting show, but it's hard to get into. It's hard to build an audience for, but the people who do like it really like it. It's like, for me, the thing that interests me in shows to begin with is the art style and, the basic demeanor that I see that you can get from just like a quick look at a trailer. But the thing that makes me fall in love with the show is its story. It's like, it's difficult. But the people who just want story to begin with, they're going to find it hard to get into this show. And then there's also the whole issue of Disney and its content are like really weird these days. Like, I think the show came out at just about the worst time possible because it was released on Disney Channel, but maybe not in America, and it was mostly, in their more international markets. But they never really advertised for it that well. But it also came at the same time when Disney Plus was getting off the ground. And this show, if it was originally launched on Disney Plus with some proper, exposure, it might have, I have no idea why this show isn't more popular, because it is so good. And maybe, I don't know. I really think that this show won't get any extra seasons. And what we have is what we have. But it's really good. And I think that, there's always that thing. It's like, would you rather see a show leave you wanting more and not get it? Or a show that overstayed its welcome and by the end of it you were like, ugh, I'm kind of done with it by now. The only reason I keep watching is because I'm invested. That's kind of what I felt like with the last 2 seasons of Friendship is Magic. It's like season 7 was the last good season of Friendship is Magic. Seasons 8 and 9 were really just running on fumes. But it's kind of sad because, I was looking forward to the show for a new generation. But then they literally just slapped the CalArts art style onto ponies, and it is so ugly. It's so bad. I watched one of the episodes that they have online for free, and it's like everything about it is something I could enjoy. Like, the backgrounds are pretty good, the voice acting is pretty good, the storyline was okay. I mean, it was just the unicorn being stuck in a box the whole episode. And, they had some fun with that. And it wasn't even that long. It didn't overstay its welcome. But, oh my goodness, the characters are so ugly. It's like, maybe one day the industry will be like, okay, enough of that. But until then, we're going to keep getting Cal Arts, and they're probably just going to ignore 101 Dalmatian Street, which solved it. It's like, it's so bad. But let's talk about, the general story. This show, it was like, it does such a good job of taking the whole 101 Dalmatians concept and bringing it into a TV show based on, like, set in the modern era. So what is the number one thing about 101 Dalmatians? It is a family of dogs living in London that is huge, massive. They're all Dalmatians, same breed of dog, and just a massive family. And so it's like, there's another show that's, fairly popular and successful these days called The Loud House or something, and it's about a large family. And I feel like this is sort of, maybe it was pitched. Maybe this show was pitched as a way to compete with that market. But it turns out that, maybe that market isn't something you want to compete in. And maybe that's one of the reasons why they probably won't have another season. I don't know. And it is interesting. It's like, it is a really large family, and there are a surprising number of characters in that family who actually have real development. It's like, here are the rules of the show. Everybody all the major dogs all have first names that have, like, the first letter of their first name is the same as their breed. And so these are all Dalmatians. Guess what all of the characters' names start with? D. And so this is Delilah. Her husband is Doug. Their children all start with D. Dylan, Dolly, Dawkins, Triple D, Destiny, Dallas, and Deja Vu. Like, just, there are so many D names. In fact, that they even had an entire song about it. I once thought that I could memorize the entire thing, but yeah, I couldn't. And so, like, this fox character, his name is Fergus. The husky, his name is Hansel. It's fun. Portia, she's a poodle. And so it's fun, and just the sheer number of siblings in this show that actually have, some actual development. In fact, a bunch of them have an entire episode about them, and some of those episodes are some of the best in the entire series. Like, there's Da Vinci. She's the artist dog, and she has a really good episode. And besides that one episode, she doesn't get too much. And then there's Deepak. He's sort of like the peacekeeper sibling. He has one episode. It's really good. There's so many basically one-off episodes about single characters, and a bunch of them are really good. Now, one of the things I really enjoy about this show is showing the romance that Doug and Delilah have. It's like, you can tell that they are making this couple is making a dedicated effort to keep their romance alive. It's like, yeah, they've got a big family, and yeah, they've got to deal with so many kids, but they make sure that they've got time to go on dates with each other. It's like relationship goals. Oh my goodness. And they're both working professionals. It's really interesting. She's Delilah, the character that this entire complete animation is focused on. She works at a hospital. She's basically a medical professional. And Doug, he works for the firefighters, which, fair enough. There's the whole, sort of legendary status that Dalmatians used to work with firefighters. As far as what I understand, it was back in the day of horse-drawn wagons, when a fire engine was literally being towed around town by horses. They would use Dalmatians as sort of like, almost like sheepdogs, but for the horses. They would have the highly trained Dalmatian be there to keep the horses in line. And that's a cool sort of a historical thing. Who knows how common that really was, but it certainly stuck around in popular culture. Like, I watched the Paw Patrol movie. Now, that's another thing. Like, the Paw Patrol movie, I was like, yeah, I'm in for this. This is high quality animation. But then I tried scrubbing through a little bit of one of the episodes and was like, yeah, this ain't purty. I think I'll just stick to the movie. But yeah, even in that one, the dog whose entire job is to run the fire truck, yeah, he's a Dalmatian, because of course he is. Now, let's talk about Delilah herself. She is sort of like, she really exemplifies what this show does with the character models. When she's sitting towards the camera, her front legs sort of like meld into one thing. It's like there's no gap between them. And it works. Like, that is a design thing that works. And then when she's also sitting down and looking directly towards the camera, her hind legs as she's sitting are just splayed out wide, but it works. And like, they really do a good job of sort of exaggerating character, like the character models with these really simple shapes. It works so well. In fact, if you look really close, like, I'm pretty sure that this show uses symbols for all of its characters. So they're basically like puppets that you just, drag and drop specific elements onto. But it works. Like, there are so many shows that basically do that, but it works but they make it work. And this one is no exception. And just these really simple sort of like almost ovals and things that they use to make the characters, it just works so well. And if you look at her collar, it's basically just a really simple, almost like a cylinder sort of a shape, and it works so well. And then here's this part where Cruella de Vil is finally invading, and the parents are like, well, gotta protect the kids. It's not quite as fierce as Pongo and Perdita were in the original movie. Like, they're like, holy cow, their hackles were raised so high, and yeah. Like, I think that this finale, it's sort of a mixed bag for me, because this is the time when the characters and their models are really put through their paces, but I kind of feel like Cruella de Vil doesn't really belong. But I guess that's sort of intentional, because she's sort of taking on a horror sort of a role. Like, she's really creepy, and she's meant to be, and they dial that up to 11. They lean into that. And that's another thing I like, when characters are standing up and facing the camera, their hind legs sort of splay out like their hips. Yeah, it just works. So yeah, 101 Dalmatian Street. One of the best modern Disney animated series, which gets absolutely zero love from the greater public. I could do more characters and talk more about this show, but as it is, thanks for watching.